Hello, my name is Darius Bell, and today I will be talking about the Ontological Argument by William Rowe. This argument is completely a priori, which means that it's based on principles that we know independent from our own worldly experience, such as logic or intuition. It agrees that it is self-contradictory to deny that there is a greatest possible being that exists. All the ontological arguments are conceptual arguments. When we speak about God, which is a big premise for ontological arguments, we imagine a being in our head, and we understand that there is a version of this being in our minds that can't exist in our mind alone. Since someone believes there is an understanding that the being exists that is greater than everything else, it can exist in our mind and in reality. It's different than the cosmological argument because the cosmological argument is based on the understanding that there are things in the world and these things cause each other to exist. And it's different than the teleological argument, excuse me. Because the teleological argument states that the world has natural design and order, which create things to happen. The ontological argument argues for the conclusion that God exists based on sources other than our own observation of the world. An example could be your living situation, your dream house. You could envision a very extravagant house with all the bells and whistles. If you could live in this dwelling, it would be perfect. If it didn't exist in your mind, it wouldn't be your perfect dwelling. And the ontological argument says that existing is greater than non-existing, so it must exist in some capacity in the world. The ontological argument says that if you can imagine the perfect being, it would be more perfect if it wasn't just a figure of your imagination. Then it must exist in that form. If we can imagine something logically with no absurdity, then it must be possible for it to exist. Another example could be extraterrestrial life. If we can imagine that there's a more perfect version of ourselves out there, there must be a logical, ontological argument to support that. The ontological argument supports using logic as the main power source to come up with theories, as opposed to our own previous observations of the world. And many people reject the argument because it may seem like these assumptions are made on a whim, without much evidence. Some people think the argument seems shaky. They understand it as the fact that they could imagine anything they want and that would be true, but all the argument is saying is that if there is a viable logical explanation for something like the existence of God that isn't absurd in its own ideology, then it's possible for it to exist.